I think this is a necessary step forward for justice for him and his family. Would I engage in a lawsuit? I mean, there are probably a lot of lawyers that will be jumping on top of this, but I think there's a little bit more into this besides a lawsuit, because you don't want this to be the number one thing to be guiding your or to be remembered for. I would also expand on this further to talk about the real danger of activists and organizers and protesters being rounded up, okay? Because I think there's a bigger story here. Because what happened to Mahmoud Khalil, I will say this: it should never have happened to him or any other activist or organizer that was wrongly picked up by ICE or by any other, I guess, law enforcement, federal, state authorities. I'll also go on here to say this too, that I don't like it how the Biden-Harris administration went after activists and organizers too. Both parties have engaged in very deceptive, tyrannical practices that put our very freedoms at risk. And there's one thing that Heartland's media believes in, and that is the First Amendment right, free speech. You don't have to like the person. And yes, there are even bad people that abuse the First Amendment. But I think right now at this point in time, I think this is a very good stepping stone, but I think more needs to be talked about in regards towards, if you're going to be critical of a politician, the administration, doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican, hell, even independent, our right to protest and assemble must and shall and must forever be protected. That's what I believe in. That's something I hold true to my heart. I will never change on that position. I believe in the First Amendment. That is going to be Heartland's media's legacy. The First Amendment, free speech, free speech, free speech.
Just 2 weeks after regaining his freedom, Mahmoud Khalil wants to hold the Trump administration accountable in court. This week, he filed a claim for $20 million in damages against the Trump administration, alleging he was falsely imprisoned, maliciously prosecuted, and smeared as an anti-Semite by the government because of his role in campus protests. The pro-Palestinian activist was arrested in March by plainclothes federal agents while returning home from dinner. Khalil's wife, Dr. Noor Abdallah, was 8 months pregnant at the time and delivered their son, Dean, while Mahmoud was detained. We spoke with them both exclusively after Khalil's release last month after 104 days in custody. He spoke with our friends on the Weekend morning show this morning about seeking restitution.
If the government can disappear people for speaking out, for protesting, for being who they are, in my case, for being Palestinian, for being visible and vocal, then none of us is safe. No one in this country is safe.
I think this lawsuit took some people by surprise a bit this week, in part because I think understandably people expected the couple to take a lot of time to rest and retreat a bit from the spotlight. On the other hand, it makes sense as his legal team continues to fight this case out on so many fronts.
In my opinion, maybe I would have rested. That's just my opinion after going through that. But then again, too, people will forget. The internet does forget. So we'll see what happens with this case.
Multiple states from New Jersey to Louisiana, which is where his immigration case continues to wind through the process right now. What did you make of this, Eamon?
I think that there's two things that are important. One, I also really appreciated the apology part of this, which is that he said he was going to withdraw or he would accept in lieu of the $20 million, the administration apologizing for what they have done and then rescinding the policies of trying.
There will be no apology, because here's the thing: when you apologize, you're admitting, you're admitting, right? And that opens up a whole other case. All right. Why do you think ABC News or CBS never apologized for or at least that the anchors never apologized, right? Why?
To deport people on the basis of free speech or their activism. But I do think what is important about this is the fight. And we've talked about this when we interviewed him, how I think within a day or two of being released, he went back out to the gates of Columbia University and protested. I remember we asked his wife about it as well, and how that was so central to their identity. But it speaks to the moment in time we find ourselves in the country. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody is aware of what the threat of this administration is, and everybody has to do their part to try to fight back in whatever capacity they can. I don't know the legal ins and outs of the arguments and the cases that are being made, but the ability to put the administration on their heels, for them to tie up resources, for them to bring in lawyers, for them to have to make their case in public, in court, in front of judges, for the rest of the country to see, I think is important, because when they are pushed, when this administration is pushed to make a case about their behavior, as we have seen time and time again, those arguments as presented in court are very different than what they're saying in public. Yeah. And we see how flimsy their arguments are. And so much of this relies on the administration's ability to inject fear into our society. So when you get somebody like Mahmoud and his wife and his legal team who say, we are not afraid, we are going to take this fight to you, and we're going to stand up for what we believe to be right, I think it's a sign of optimism and a glimmer of hope in a very dark time.
Yeah, I think your point about his accepting an apology in lieu of a big bounty, I think is really important here. The question is, how much is the First Amendment worth? Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
How much is it worth? Maybe.
And the First Amendment must be protected. Look, what happened to the people on January 6th? I always found that. I always found that ordeal to not only be maddening, but a complete waste of time. And many people were arrested and detained for stupid reasons. I thought that whole entire day was stupid. Okay. And hell, YouTube had a knee-jerk reaction to everybody that was covering it, which is the dumbest thing I ever saw. Do I think an apology, again, if there was to be an apology made, this administration will not apologize. I mean, that's number one. No, they're not going to apologize. No administration is going to apologize. Okay, that's to be clear here. And second, this lawsuit, yeah, it is to be expected that he'd file it. I do have a concern because this is Donald Trump we're talking about, and this is a guy whose whole life is surrounded with lawsuits. He eats and breathes this kind of stuff.
Maybe you could get a payoff for $20 million to have your life turned upside down and be detained for over 100 days because of your speech. But no, he's making the point that what matters here is in the United States, we respect the First Amendment. We respect the right to protest, the right to express opinions that the government may not like, and all of the other civil rights that are enshrined by our Constitution.
I want to make one quick aside too, because I think some of his comments on Colombia have kind of gone under the radar lately, but he's consistently mentioned to reporters in recent days too that Colombia did not reach out to him after he got out of detention. He is a member of their student community. He was involved in directly negotiating with administrators and trying to come to solutions. So how can students protest while making sure our campus is safe? I mean, he was one of the faces of that entire process, working with administrators there. They know him. They have his number. Yeah. They have his email. That nobody reached out to him after spending 104 days in a place where he said the food was so bad that he vomited. Yeah. He wasn't able to see his son. It says a lot in this moment, and I think it just bears repeating.
And to add to that, we already know Colombia capitulated with the agreement they made with the Trump administration for the funding. So I just have to say, I am not surprised that Colombia continues to take this position and continues just to time and time again mishandle this situation.
Well, we will see how our institutions.
Yeah, well, the institutions will always fail. They're always going to fail. I want to pull up this here as well. Feelings are not facts, and I think Due Dissidents talked about this too.
You understand why some Jewish students might feel threatened, not just on Columbia, but at campuses around the country.
We need to distinguish between being uncomfortable and between being unsafe. So there should be a distinction between these two. I can understand how these protests may make someone uncomfortable, hearing that your country or a country that you support is committing a genocide. I can understand that, but feelings are not facts.
You understand why
feelings are not facts. True, feelings are not facts. And also, I want to pull this up here as well. Just a little bit more. Just about this video here. Another one.
Today, we filed for $20 million in damages against the Trump administration because of the unconstitutional and unlawful arrest and all these conditions that I was put under. It's clear to me it's either the 20 million or an official apology from the administration, because ultimately my goal is not self-enrichment. I don't want this money just because I need money. What I want is actually accountability, real accountability.
So if President Trump apologized, would you accept that?
If it's a formal apology, that of course would reverse his fascist agenda, then definitely I would accept that.
Let me tell you something. Trump ain't ever going to apologize. Okay, that's to be clear here. Trump is never going to apologize. Now, somebody like Donald Trump does thrive on lawfare. Okay, be he on the defense, which he went through during the entire 2024 election cycle, and hell, even before then. And even as a plaintiff, this is a person. Know your opponent. Yeah, I'm not going to say that he should not be filing a lawsuit. I don't know if that would be my first choice. If I was to strategize, I would say, hey, now's the time to do a nationwide tour. Talk about your story. Write a book. Do a documentary. Talk about it. Is a lawsuit really that step forward? I would save that as the last option. That's just my opinion. I understand this is a very emotional, sensitive topic, but I'm just looking at the bigger picture here. Like, what is a better option? Because you're not going to get an apology from Trump. Trump is never going to apologize. What happened to Mahmoud and a few others is unjust, absolutely. And I'll say that to anyone across the political spectrum, especially people who have been detained also by the Biden-Harris administration. The Uhuru Group, for example, okay? They went through a nightmare under a Democrat administration, okay? And we're only just scratching the surface here. If I was Mahmoud, if I was just giving my 2 cents, tell your story, go on different podcasts, write a book, write your story. Make sure you're protected from any kind of blowback from legalities or anything else, but write a book, tell your story, do a documentary, talk about the right to protest, talk about the what's happening in Gaza. Of course, that's the number one thing. Talk about what's happening in Gaza. That's what I would do. Now, many other people say, no, go ahead, sue. Last resort. That's just my opinion. I'm probably wrong on it, but I would have done all those other options before filing any kind of lawsuit. But that's his right to do, and now he's in it. So we will see what happens in the long run. We will see what happens in the long run. But this is also a bigger fight here is our First Amendment right for free speech. And you may not like a protest or an activist group, but I know what it's like to be censored. And we have seen people wrongly get detained and suppressed. The fight to preserve the First Amendment is still ongoing. And that's why you should still subscribe. With that